A wounded cowboy tried to push her away, until he heard her say, "Then I'll stay." The morning sun rose slowly over the wide open land, painting the sky with soft orange light as the cowboy started another long day. The ranch stood far from town, surrounded by dry grass, old fences, and endless silence. Most people believed he chose this lonely life because he loved quiet places, but the truth was different. He lived alone because it felt safer that way. Years ago, he had been different. People remembered him as strong, friendly, and full of energy. But after a serious accident changed his life, he became quieter. The injury left him with pain that never fully disappeared. Some days were better than others, but every step reminded him of what he had lost. Over time, he stopped trusting others to stay. One by one, people moved on with their lives, and he learned not to expect anyone to remain beside him. He woke early each morning before the world became noisy. The routine gave him control. Feed the horses, check the water tanks, repair broken boards, fix tools. Work kept his thoughts busy. Silence helped him avoid memories. The ranch itself was strong but tired, much like him. The barn doors creaked when they opened. Dust covered the windows. Tools hung in careful order because he liked things predictable. Predictable meant safe. He rarely visited town. When he did, conversations stayed short. People respected him, but they also sensed the distance he created. No one tried too hard to get close anymore. One afternoon, while he was loading supplies into his truck, the local store owner mentioned a woman looking for work. She had arrived recently and needed a place to stay for a short time. Without thinking much, the store owner suggested the ranch because he clearly needed help, even if he never admitted it. The cowboy shook his head immediately. He worked alone. That was how things stayed simple, but life rarely listened to plans. A few days later, while he was repairing a fence under the hot sun, he noticed someone walking toward him from the dusty road. At first, he assumed it was a delivery person or a lost traveler. As the figure came closer, he saw it was a woman carrying a small bag. Her steps were steady but careful, as if she had traveled far. She greeted him politely and explained she had been told he might need help on the ranch. Her voice was calm, without pressure or desperation. She did not beg or demand. She simply asked. He answered with short words. No, he didn't need help. He worked alone. Most people would have turned away immediately. Instead, she nodded quietly, thanked him for his time, and turned to leave without argument. Something about her calm reaction caught his attention. There was no disappointment on her face, only understanding. Later that evening, as he struggled to move a heavy piece of equipment, pain shot through his leg. He paused, breathing slowly until it faded. He hated moments like that because they reminded him that he was no longer as strong as before. The next morning, she returned. This time, she offered to help just for the day in exchange for a meal and a place to rest. He hesitated longer. Finally, practical thinking won. One day would not change anything. Their first hours working together were quiet. She followed instructions carefully, learning quickly without asking too many questions. He noticed she respected his space, speaking only when needed. That alone made her different from others. She repaired small things he had ignored, tightening loose wires, organizing tools, sweeping areas he considered unimportant. The ranch began to look slightly less worn by evening. When he saw her cooking a simple meal outside the small house, he felt a strange discomfort. The smell of warm food felt unfamiliar. He had grown used to eating quickly without care. They ate mostly in silence. She didn't try to force conversation, and he found that surprisingly easy. Usually silence felt heavy, but this time it felt calm. Days passed, and one day turned into several. He told himself it was temporary. She told him she would leave when he asked. Neither mentioned how natural their routine had started to feel. He noticed small things about her. She spoke gently to the horses, and even the most stubborn one allowed her to approach without resistance. She hummed quietly while working, a soft sound that filled empty spaces without becoming distracting. She laughed rarely, but when she did, it felt honest. One afternoon, while carrying water buckets, he stumbled slightly. She stepped forward to help, but he pulled away quickly, pride rising before gratitude could appear. He told her sharply that he didn't need assistance. Instead of reacting with anger, she simply nodded and continued working. That calm acceptance confused him. Most people would have argued or felt offended. She did neither. That evening, he sat alone on the porch watching the sunset while she finished feeding the animals. He realized something unusual. He felt less tired than usual. Not physically, but emotionally. The ranch no longer felt completely empty. Still, he reminded himself this would not last. People always moved on. That was how life worked. One morning he woke before sunrise as usual, but noticed the light already on in the barn. She was there, preparing feed. For a moment, he simply watched from a distance. The scene felt peaceful in a way he had forgotten. He turned away quickly, uncomfortable with the warmth growing inside him. He told himself not to get used to it. Later that day, a neighbor stopped by unexpectedly and commented that the ranch looked different, more alive. The cowboy dismissed the remark, but the words stayed with him long after the neighbor left. As evening came, she sat quietly near the fence, looking at the open land. He hesitated before joining her. They spoke a little more than usual. She shared small stories about traveling and starting over without revealing too much about her past. He listened more than he talked. For the first time in years, he felt the urge to ask someone to stay longer. The thought surprised him enough that he stood up quickly and returned to work. That night, as he lay in bed, he realized he had waited all day to hear her voice again. The realization made him uneasy. He had spent years building walls to protect himself, and now those walls felt slightly weaker. Outside, the wind moved across the fields, carrying the quiet sound of life continuing. Inside, he stared at the ceiling, unsure whether the change was good or dangerous. He told himself this was only temporary, but deep down, something had already begun to shift. The days began to follow a new rhythm, one that felt unfamiliar yet strangely comforting to the cowboy. Before she arrived, mornings had always been quiet and heavy, filled only with the sounds of animals and wind moving across the land. Now there were small signs of life everywhere: a kettle warming on the stove, fresh water waiting near the barn, tools placed neatly where they could be easily reached. He told himself these changes were practical. Having help made work faster, nothing more. Still, he noticed how the ranch felt less empty. Even the long spaces between tasks felt lighter. She worked without trying to impress anyone. She did not ask for praise or approval. Instead, she focused on learning how things were done. When she made mistakes, she corrected them quietly. The cowboy watched from a distance, surprised by how quickly she adapted. One afternoon, while repairing an old fence together, she asked him simple questions about the land. Not personal questions, just things about the soil, the weather patterns, and the history of the ranch. He answered carefully at first, giving short replies. Over time, his explanations grew longer without him realizing it. Talking about the ranch felt safe because it was something solid. He knew every inch of the land, every broken post, every patch of grass that struggled to grow. Sharing that knowledge felt different from sharing feelings. As the sun moved across the sky, he noticed she listened carefully. She did not interrupt or rush him. That patience made him continue speaking even when he thought he had nothing more to say. Later that evening, she cooked another simple meal. He sat at the table, unsure how to behave. Eating alone had become normal for him. Sharing food felt almost like stepping into someone else's life. She talked a little about her travels, moving from one place to another, searching for work, learning new skills along the way. Her stories were calm, without drama, yet he sensed there were deeper reasons behind her constant movement. He did not ask. Asking felt too personal. Days passed and small habits formed between them. She filled his coffee cup before he noticed it was empty. He prepared tools for her without being asked. These quiet actions felt natural, as if they had worked together for years. Despite this growing comfort, he remained cautious. Whenever conversations moved toward personal subjects, he pulled back. He believed distance was necessary to protect both of them. One morning, a storm rolled across the land without warning. Dark clouds gathered quickly, and strong wind pushed against the barn doors. They worked together to secure equipment and guide the animals to shelter. Rain fell heavily, turning the ground into mud. During the chaos, he slipped slightly because of his injured leg. She reached out to steady him. This time, he did not pull away immediately. For a brief moment, he allowed her support before stepping back. After the storm passed, they sat quietly under the barn roof, watching water drip from the edges. The air smelled fresh. He realized they had worked smoothly as a team without needing many words. Something inside him shifted again. The next day, he went to town for supplies and returned with extra food without explaining why. He placed the items on the kitchen counter and walked away quickly, pretending it meant nothing. She noticed but said nothing, respecting his unspoken gestures. Neighbors began stopping by more often, curious about the changes on the ranch. Some greeted her warmly, while others teased him lightly about finally accepting help. He reacted with short replies, uncomfortable with attention. Later that evening, he felt irritated without fully understanding why. Perhaps it was the way people assumed things about his life. Perhaps it was fear that the peaceful routine would disappear if others became too involved. That night he told her she should consider finding work elsewhere soon. His voice sounded colder than he intended. She looked at him calmly, nodding without argument. Her quiet acceptance left him feeling unsettled. The following morning felt heavier. Work continued, but the silence between them carried tension. He wondered if he had said too much, yet pride stopped him from correcting himself. As days went by, he noticed she began organizing her belongings quietly, preparing for departure even though she never mentioned leaving directly. Watching this stirred something uncomfortable inside him, a feeling he could not easily name. One evening, while repairing a broken gate, he found himself working more slowly than usual. He kept glancing toward the house, noticing how different it looked now that he imagined it empty again. Memories of past losses returned. People leaving had always felt like proof that he was better off alone. Yet now, the thought of returning to complete silence felt heavier than before. He tried to focus on work, but his thoughts kept returning to her steady presence, the way she greeted each morning without complaint, the way she respected his space while still bringing warmth. Later that night, she sat outside watching the stars. He joined her after a long hesitation. The sky stretched wide above them, filled with quiet beauty. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, she mentioned that traveling alone had taught her how temporary everything could be. She said people often came into each other's lives for a reason, even if only for a short time. Her words made him uncomfortable because they sounded like goodbye. He told himself again that distance was safer. Attachment led to disappointment. Yet the more he repeated this belief, the less convincing it felt. The next morning, he woke earlier than usual, unable to sleep. He walked outside and noticed she had already begun feeding the animals. Watching her move through the soft morning light filled him with an unexpected sense of calm. He realized he had begun looking forward to each day because of her presence. That realization frightened him more than anything else. Throughout the day, he tried to act normal, but small moments felt heavier, handing her tools, sharing water, working side by side. Every action felt like it carried unspoken meaning. As evening approached, he finally spoke more openly than before. He mentioned that life on the ranch was hard and unpredictable. He explained that people often left because they wanted easier futures. His voice remained steady, but the words revealed deeper fears. She listened quietly, then replied that sometimes people stay not because life is easy, but because it feels right. Her response stayed with him long after the conversation ended. That night, he sat alone on the porch thinking about everything that had changed in such a short time. The ranch looked the same, yet it felt different, warmer, less heavy. He realized he had started to depend on her presence, even though he never intended to. The thought made him uneasy because dependence meant risk. Inside the house, she prepared for sleep, unaware that he stood outside wrestling with emotions he had avoided for years. The wind moved gently across the land, carrying a sense that something important was approaching, a turning point neither of them could yet see clearly. And for the first time in a long time, he felt uncertain about the walls he had built around his heart. The change began slowly, almost too quietly to notice at first. The ranch continued its daily rhythm, but something underneath the calm started to shift. The cowboy felt it every time he looked at her and quickly looked away again. The feeling was unfamiliar and uncomfortable, like standing at the edge of something he had spent years avoiding. Work became heavier, not only because of the long hours, but because of the thoughts that followed him everywhere. He caught himself watching her laugh softly at the animals, noticing the way she moved through the ranch as if she belonged there. That thought frightened him. Belonging meant connection. Connection meant risk. One afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail. He opened it quietly while standing near the barn. The contents spoke of overdue payments and deadlines that could not be ignored. The ranch had always survived through his determination, but now the pressure felt stronger than before. He folded the letter carefully and placed it back in his pocket without saying anything. Pride told him he could handle everything alone, just as he always had. Yet the weight of responsibility pressed heavily against him. Throughout the day, he became quieter. She noticed the change but did not ask questions immediately. She understood that some moments required space. Later, while repairing equipment together, he worked faster than usual, almost pushing himself beyond comfort. His injured leg began to ache, but he refused to slow down. She suggested taking a short break, speaking gently, but he responded with a sharp tone that surprised even himself. Silence followed. The air between them felt tense. He regretted his reaction immediately but did not apologize. Admitting weakness felt harder than carrying pain. That evening, as the sun began to set, he sat alone near the fence, staring at the land stretching endlessly before him. The letter weighed heavily in his thoughts. He wondered if he could truly keep the ranch running. The idea of failure felt unbearable. When she approached quietly and sat beside him, he felt both comfort and fear at the same time. Her presence made things easier, yet it also reminded him how much he could lose. She asked softly if something was wrong. For a long moment he said nothing. Finally, he replied that everything was fine. The words sounded empty even to him. She did not argue. Instead, she remained beside him in silence, offering support without pressure. Days passed, and the tension grew stronger. He began waking earlier and working longer hours, trying to solve problems alone. She continued helping, but he kept emotional distance, speaking less than before. One morning, while organizing supplies, she suggested new ways to improve efficiency on the ranch. Her ideas were practical and thoughtful, but he reacted defensively, insisting he knew how to manage his own land. The conversation ended quickly, leaving both of them unsettled. He told himself pushing her away was necessary. If she stayed too long, she would become part of his life, and that thought felt dangerous. He believed people always left eventually, and preparing for that now seemed easier than facing it later. Still, small moments betrayed his true feelings. When she disappeared from sight, he found himself searching for her without realizing it. When she laughed, he felt lighter even if he tried not to show it. One evening, after a long day, she mentioned she might start looking for other work soon if he no longer needed help. Her voice remained calm, but the words felt like a sudden storm inside him. Instead of admitting he wanted her to stay, he nodded coldly and agreed it was probably best. The look in her eyes changed slightly, not hurt but thoughtful, as if she understood something deeper about his reaction. That night, sleep refused to come easily. He lay awake listening to the quiet sounds of the ranch, imagining it empty again. The thought filled him with a loneliness sharper than he expected. The next morning, tension reached its peak. They worked together repairing a broken structure damaged by wind. As they lifted heavy boards, his leg gave a sudden warning of pain. He tried to hide it, but she noticed immediately and stepped forward to help. This time, he reacted strongly, telling her to stop treating him as if he were weak. The words came out harsher than intended, carrying frustration he had been holding inside. She stepped back, giving him space. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, he said what he had been thinking for days, that she should leave. He told her she deserved better than a difficult life on a struggling ranch. He claimed he worked better alone and did not want anyone depending on him. The words felt heavy in the air. She listened quietly without interrupting. When he finished, she remained silent long enough that he began to feel uncertain. He expected anger or disappointment, but her response came gently. She said she understood he was afraid of losing control, afraid of needing someone. Her honesty caught him off guard. He tried to deny it, insisting he was only being practical. She shook her head slightly, not arguing but seeing through his defenses. For the first time, she spoke about her own past more openly. She explained that she had spent years moving from place to place because she believed staying anywhere would only lead to pain. She understood the instinct to leave before being left. Her words mirrored his own fears, and that made him uncomfortable. He repeated that she should go, believing distance would protect both of them. She stood quietly, looking at him with calm determination. Then she said something simple but powerful. If he wanted her to leave because she chose to go, she would respect that. But if he wanted her to leave because he was afraid, then she would stay. The statement stunned him into silence. He had prepared for arguments, for emotional reactions, but not for quiet strength. Her decision removed control from his hands, forcing him to confront feelings he had avoided. After that moment, she returned to work as if nothing dramatic had happened. Her calm behavior made everything feel more real. Throughout the day, he struggled to focus. Every word she had spoken echoed in his mind. He realized he had tried to push her away not because he didn't want her there, but because he feared how important she had become. As evening arrived, they sat together again near the fence. The sky turned deep shades of red and gold. Neither spoke for a long time. He finally admitted he did not know how to let people stay without expecting loss. Saying those words felt like opening a door he had kept locked for years. She listened quietly and said that staying did not mean promising forever. It simply meant choosing today. Her words felt both simple and profound. The wind moved softly across the land, carrying away some of the tension that had built between them. He realized he could not control every outcome. Trying to protect himself by pushing people away only created more loneliness. That night, as he watched the stars, he felt something changing inside him. The walls he had built were no longer as strong as before. For the first time, he wondered what life might look like if he allowed someone to stay, not because he needed saving, but because he wanted companionship. The days after their quiet confrontation passed with a different rhythm. The cowboy noticed small changes in himself that he had not expected. He still woke early, still worked long hours, but he no longer felt the same emptiness when he looked across the fields. She moved through the ranch with ease, quietly tending to chores, and he realized that her presence no longer made him anxious. It made the land feel fuller, alive in a way it had not been for years. Work became a shared effort. He no longer tried to do everything alone. When a heavy gate needed repairing, they lifted it together. When the horses required extra attention, she handled them as if she had known them her whole life. He observed her gently, admiring her patience with animals and the way she anticipated problems before they grew too big. Her presence brought efficiency, but it also brought calm, and slowly he began to enjoy it. He found himself talking more, though cautiously. Small pieces of his past slipped out in conversation. Nothing too deep, nothing that would betray his pride, yet enough that she understood him better than anyone had in a long time. He spoke about the accident, how it had changed him physically and emotionally. He did not dwell on the pain, but on how it forced him to see the world differently. She listened without judgment, nodding quietly and offering gentle understanding when he finished. She, in turn, shared bits of her life. She did not speak of heartbreak or sorrow in dramatic terms, but of the challenges she had faced traveling from place to place, the uncertainty of not knowing where her next home would be, the loneliness that often followed her. He recognized a similar thread in their experiences. Both had known hardship, both had built walls to protect themselves. Yet she had not hardened completely. She had remained open, trusting enough to stay when others might have left. A quiet understanding grew between them. Words were no longer the only form of communication. She would glance at him, and he would understand. He would leave tools in a certain way, and she would follow without needing instruction. Their partnership became seamless, natural. It was in these moments of silent coordination that he felt something he had not experienced in years: trust. One morning, they encountered an unexpected challenge. A fence had been damaged during a sudden storm the night before, and the horses had wandered dangerously close to a steep edge. They rushed to secure the animals and repair the fence. His leg throbbed from the effort, but he refused to complain. She noticed anyway, quietly helping him adjust the boards and steadying him when his foot slipped in the mud. The physical closeness, though purely practical, stirred emotions he tried to suppress. He realized he had started to rely on her without even realizing it. Later that day, he attempted to speak more honestly. He admitted that he often feared dependence, that letting anyone close had always seemed risky. She did not interrupt. She waited patiently as he spoke, offering only a reassuring presence. Then she said something simple yet profound. "It is not weakness to let someone help you. It is strength to share the burden." The words lingered, and he found himself reflecting on them long after she had gone inside for the evening. Evenings became quieter, more peaceful. They would sit outside together, sometimes working on small projects, other times simply watching the sun set over the fields. Conversations turned lighter, filled with small jokes, observations, and stories. He realized that laughter had returned to his life, though gently and without pretense. She did not force it, it simply happened naturally. The ranch, once a place of relentless work and solitude, now held warmth and companionship. Neighbors began to notice the change as well. They commented on the improved appearance of the ranch, on how the cowboy seemed more approachable. He bristled slightly at first, still unused to attention, but soon he learned to accept the remarks with quiet acknowledgement. He noticed that her presence had not only improved his life, but the impression the ranch left on the town. She brought light where he had only offered shadows. Despite this growing comfort, he remained cautious. Old fears did not disappear overnight. Some days he would feel a tightness in his chest, a whisper of the loneliness he had endured for so long. He would withdraw slightly, walking along the fence lines, pretending to inspect the land while quietly sorting his own thoughts. She noticed these moments, but she did not push him. She simply stayed nearby, patient and steady, giving him the space he sometimes needed without removing herself completely. One morning, while he was mending a broken water trough, he realized he was speaking more openly than ever. He explained the routines, the reasoning behind his methods, the care needed to maintain the ranch through harsh seasons. She listened attentively, asking questions when needed, showing genuine interest. He felt a flicker of pride, not for the work he had done, but for the fact that he could share it with someone who understood. This exchange marked a turning point. He began to see her as a partner rather than a temporary helper. The walls he had built around his heart were still present, but no longer impenetrable. He started to imagine a future where someone could stay without fear, where connection did not necessarily mean loss. The idea both frightened and excited him. Their relationship deepened through small, meaningful actions. She would leave freshly cleaned tools in order, and he would find them arranged just as he liked. She tended to the horses with care, and he noticed how calmer the animals became in her presence. They learned to anticipate each other's needs, a quiet rhythm forming naturally. He realized that trust could grow not through words alone, but through consistent actions and shared effort. One evening, as they finished feeding the animals, he noticed her pause and look at him differently. There was no question, no request, just a gentle, steady gaze. He felt a warmth in his chest he had long forgotten, a sense of being seen and understood. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel grateful not just for her help, but for her presence in his life. Gratitude turned slowly into something more, something he dared not name yet. As days continued, he found himself worrying less about the future and more about the present. He still knew the ranch required hard work, and he still struggled with the pain in his leg, but those burdens felt lighter with her beside him. He realized that sharing responsibility did not weaken him, it strengthened him. The work that once felt like an endless chore now carried a sense of purpose and satisfaction. One afternoon, she suggested planting a small garden near the house. He initially hesitated, unsure of the idea, but agreed when he saw her determination. Working together in the dirt, planting seeds, watering carefully, and watching the sun reflect off the soil, he found joy in the simple act. She laughed when dirt got on his hands, and he found himself smiling without reserve. It was a moment of pure connection, a reminder that life could hold small pleasures even amidst hardship. The garden became a symbol of their growing bond. Each day, as shoots began to emerge from the soil, he noticed a parallel in himself. He was growing too, slowly opening to trust, to companionship, and to the possibility of joy. He began to see that life need not be endured alone, that choosing to let someone stay could bring warmth instead of pain. By evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, he felt a sense of calm he had not known in years. The ranch was no longer a place of isolation. It had become a home filled with shared effort, laughter, and understanding. He realized that the decision to let her stay had changed everything, not because it was easy, but because it was right. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, spilling gold across the wide fields. The cowboy stretched his legs, feeling the ache that had been part of him for years, but it no longer weighed as heavily on his spirit. He walked toward the barn and saw her already at work, feeding the animals with quiet care. For a moment he simply watched, letting the warmth of her presence fill the empty spaces he had carried alone for so long. He remembered the first days she arrived, how he had tried to push her away, how fear had guided his every word and action. Those days seemed far away now. Every morning she stayed, every small gesture she made, reminded him that trust could grow slowly, carefully, and it could heal what time and pain had damaged. That morning, a letter arrived from a distant relative offering a chance to sell some extra land. It was an opportunity, but it also carried uncertainty. He folded it slowly, considering the implications. In the past, he would have faced such decisions alone, weighed with worry and quiet despair. Now he looked at her and realized he did not have to carry the burden by himself. He could share the weight. She noticed the letter in his hand and nodded, understanding without words. "Whatever you decide, we'll face it together," she said simply. Her voice held no pressure, only calm assurance. That small statement, quiet as it was, made him feel stronger. He realized she was no longer a visitor in his life. She had chosen to stay, and her choice was a gift he did not want to waste. Days passed with the usual work, yet each moment felt more alive. They repaired fences, tended the animals, and even managed to fix the old water pump that had caused them trouble for months. Small victories became celebrations. When a young foal stumbled in the pasture, they ran together to steady it, laughing as they guided it to safety. The simple act, filled with shared effort, reminded him how companionship could make hardship lighter. Evenings became the moments he cherished most. They would sit on the porch together, hands occasionally brushing as they held mugs of hot coffee. Words were not always needed. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with understanding, trust, and the quiet promise that neither would abandon the other. He found himself speaking more freely, sharing memories he had kept locked away for years. She listened, never judging, never offering advice unless asked. Her presence alone offered comfort. One day, the storm clouds returned, darker and heavier than before. Rain fell in sheets and wind ripped at the fences. The animals were restless. The cowboy felt the familiar ache in his leg, but this time it did not frighten him. He was not alone. She worked beside him, steady and unafraid. Together, they guided the animals to shelter, secured the loose boards, and kept the worst of the storm at bay. When he stumbled, she steadied him without question. That act, simple and practical, held more meaning than words could express. He realized he had learned to rely on her without fear. After the storm passed, the ranch looked battered but alive. He walked through the muddy fields, noticing how she had already started clearing debris and checking fences. Her determination, quiet yet unwavering, inspired him. He felt gratitude, admiration, and a sense of peace he had never thought possible. For the first time, he allowed himself to hope. The following morning, he awoke to the smell of fresh bread and coffee. She had prepared breakfast quietly, leaving it ready before he even came inside. He sat at the table, feeling a warmth in his chest he could not name. He realized he had begun to care not only for her work, but for her presence itself. She was no longer just someone helping on the ranch. She was a part of it, a part of him. A neighbor stopped by that day, commenting on how much the ranch had improved and how the pair worked seamlessly together. The cowboy responded with a quiet smile, feeling a sense of pride he had not experienced in years. Pride was no longer about being alone and surviving. It was about building together something stronger than either could achieve alone. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of the ranch grew steady. He noticed his heart no longer tightened at the thought of losing her. Instead, he felt a calm confidence. She had chosen to stay because she wanted to, not out of obligation. That simple truth carried more meaning than any promise or declaration. Trust had been earned through patience, respect, and quiet acts of care. One evening, as the sun dipped low, he spoke aloud, more to himself than to her. "I never thought I'd let someone stay, but now I can't imagine being alone." She looked up, smiling softly. Her eyes reflected understanding, warmth, and a quiet joy. No words were needed beyond that glance. The bond between them had grown deeper than fear, deeper than past pain. They had built something real, something lasting. A new challenge came when the possibility of selling part of the ranch was discussed. He had feared the decision, fearing it might drive her away or change everything they had built. Yet when he brought it to her, she listened patiently, offered practical suggestions, and reminded him gently that whatever choice they made, they would face it together. For the first time, the future seemed less intimidating. It was no longer a threat, but an opportunity shared. Over time, the ranch began to flourish. Crops grew stronger, animals thrived, and the small garden they planted together provided fresh vegetables and herbs. Each success, no matter how small, felt shared. The cowboy realized that life could be fulfilling not in isolation, but in partnership. He had once believed that letting someone stay meant risking loss. Now he understood it meant gaining something far greater: companionship, trust, and hope. One quiet night they sat outside under the stars. The land stretched endlessly around them, peaceful and still. He thought of all the years spent alone, of the walls he had built, of the fear that had ruled his decisions. And he thought of her, the calm presence who had chosen to stay, who had shown him that trust could be earned, that love did not have to be spoken aloud to be real. He reached for her hand, and she took it gently, without hesitation. In that moment, the cowboy understood fully what she had already shown him. Life was not about carrying burdens alone. It was about facing them together, sharing effort, sharing laughter, sharing even the quiet moments that seemed ordinary but became extraordinary when shared with someone who stayed. He had feared attachment, feared loss, feared being vulnerable. But all that fear dissolved under the simple truth of her choice. She had stayed. The following days continued with the familiar rhythm of work and shared life. He woke early, she was already moving about, and together they tended the ranch, animals, and garden. He spoke more freely, shared memories he had held tight for years, and laughed without reservation. She, in turn, trusted him with her past and her thoughts. They built a life together, day by day, step by step, with patience, respect, and quiet understanding. In the end, the ranch was more than a place of work. It had become a home filled with warmth, laughter, and shared purpose. The cowboy had learned to let someone stay, not because it was easy, but because it was right. And she had stayed, not out of obligation, but out of choice, bringing light to a life that had long been shadowed by fear and solitude. Standing together one evening, watching the sky turn deep orange and purple, he realized that the greatest gift in life was not survival alone, but the courage to let someone stay and the willingness to stay himself. The ranch, the land, the animals, and each quiet day had all led to this. The understanding that companionship could heal wounds, rebuild hearts, and make life worth living again.